back to Your Average Witch, where every other Tuesday we talk about witch life, witch stories, and sometimes a little witchcraft. This episode of Your Average Witch is brought to you by Green Space Readings. Whether you need a tarot reading, assistance with a spell, or a custom journal, Green Space Readings can help you out. Alana is a psychic tarot reader, a Reiki practitioner with 6+ years experience, and specializes in long-distance readings. Visit greenspacereadings.com to learn more. This week I'm talking with Jake Richards, an author and conjureman from Appalachia. We talked about Decoration Day, the Bible, and family. Now let's get to the stories. Hello, Jake. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I have wanted to have you on since 2021. So,
oh, Lord.
I'm excited. Anyway, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I am awesome. Can you please introduce yourself and let everybody know who you are and what you do and where they can find you?
Yeah, my name is Jake, and I was born and raised in Upper East Tennessee. I'm on the old hunting grounds of the Cherokee, but I also spent a good amount of my childhood in Southwest Virginia and Western North Carolina. And my work mostly focuses on Appalachian folk traditions, whether that's Appalachian folk medicine, folk magic, folk religion, faith healing, kind of that whole area.
Everybody be sure to jump down below to follow Jake everywhere on socials. There will be a link. Can you tell me what it means to you when you call yourself a witch, if you do?
Well, I don't really call myself one. Other people may. Other people see me as like just a folk or a faith healer. Others see me as a conjureman. Because the work I do is based in Appalachian practices, there's different varying degrees to whether what you do makes you a witch in the traditional folkloric sense, or what you do makes you more of a faith healer. But folks will usually just understand me in the lens that they're seeing it from. That's why I named my first book Backwoods Witchcraft, because from the outside it all looks like witchcraft at first before you get down to the technicalities of it.
Which term do you prefer?
I usually stick with just conjureman, because the conjureman kind of or like the term conjurer kind of embodies all of it. So the conjurer could be found to be using herbs for healing, like medicinally, but they can also be using herbs for other spiritual purposes as well, whether that's to bring luck, love, money, protection, anything like that. But then they would also, simply use verbal charms or verbal prayers for faith healing. Whereas in Appalachian, the traditional sense, a witch was believed to be someone who was working their powers came from the devil and not from God. The conjureman was kind of in between the faith healer, whose powers and authority did come from God. Was kind of between the faith healer and the witch, in the sense that the conjureman's work was for hire. And his work could be either to harm or to heal. So between the witch, the faith healer, and the conjureman kind of warranted a lot more respect, because of how the practice goes, you never knew exactly how your standing was with him. Whereas everybody knew about the witch, and they worked with the devil, or so people said. But with the conjureman, it was always a question of his work in the community. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So when I'm talking about your practice, is there a term you'd prefer me to use, or are you okay with the term practice?
Yeah, that's fine. Or just, Appalachian folk magic, whatever. It's kind of, basically so old it doesn't really have like a proper name. I mean, it's been called trying, it's been called doctoring, fixing, working roots, all sorts of things.
Can you tell us about how you do it? Any little, like, what, if you have any consistent things you do, can you share it with us?
Consistently, because a lot of this work is based from like a Christian worldview, not necessarily evangelical Christian, that whole type of toxic deal, but more so surrounding like the mountain faiths that kind of developed here. Whether you're talking about like the old primitive Baptist or um, holiness Pentecostals or even snake handling. Um,
Have you done
so a
that?
lot. I'm sorry.
Have you done any snake handling?
Oh Lord, no. I've always wanted to go to one, but they wouldn't let me. I mean, we followed, the whole laying on of hands and casting out demons and things like that, but we never. Nana wouldn't like. She couldn't stand snakes. Um,
Yeah, I don't think my grandmother's liked them either.
yeah, but a lot of the practice is based on the Bible itself, and it's kind of based on a kind of a more loose folkloric interpretation in some sense, but then also there's a sense of like a more rigid structure surrounding it. So whereas you won't find people sticking like steadfast to the dogma as you do with modern day like evangelists and stuff, there is a little bit more leeway when it comes to like superstitions or even using the Bible itself as like a divination tool. Um, or using the Bible itself as a working in and of itself, because you can. My grandmother's Bible always had like little babies' booties, like the little tiny socks,
Yeah.
and she'd always keep them in the Bible at the portion in, I believe it's the book of Matthew, where he talks about do not let the little children suffer to come unto me. Basically talking about, to enter the kingdom of God, you must be as children.
Like a bookmark, she used it?
Yeah.
Huh.
And because it was placed at that particular verse, it was believed that, whatever child that, little sock belonged to would be protected. He has set his angels to have charge over them, that whole type of thing.
That's interesting. Huh.
Yeah, you can basically the most traditional working setup in Appalachian folk magic. All you need is a Bible, uh, a candle, which was traditionally a white taper candle before, stores in Appalachia started selling these vigil candles. Um, and then you would have a glass of water, but the glass of water would only come out whenever you were actually doing work. And so, you could just have your little working setup as just nothing but a Bible and a candle, set out on a table in the living room over like a white cloth or a doily. Um, and then whenever need be, you could set the water out, or if you were just leaving offerings for like the ancestors or something like that, you could just set out a random, cup of coffee or a cup of tea or even, a cup of, whiskey or something. And then that way it just looks like, you had been drinking something and you left it somewhere and it didn't look too overly,
Sketch.
yeah, sketch. Yeah. Because, for the past like 150 years, we've had missionaries coming into Appalachia telling us that our decoration day practices were necromancy and the ghosts of our ancestors are actually demons and all this other toxic stuff. So yeah, it was just kind of a way to still have it out there open, because that sense of independence, we ain't hiding shit, but at the same
Uh-huh.
time, we don't need everybody and their mama knowing what goes on behind closed doors.
Can you explain decorating day to people who don't know?
Yeah, so Decoration Day it wasn't exact like an exact set date, but it was kind of like the Appalachian version of the Mexican Day of the Dead. Decoration Day was traditionally done. Most communities did it in the spring. So first they would, it was usually on a Sunday. So they would pick like the third Sunday in May or something like that. And these were just individual communities. So it was like the church would have their own decoration day, and then down the road, a different church or a different community would have their annual day that they would do it. Um, so they would pick a day, and then the day before that day, they would go and they would do they would basically clean up the cemetery. They would make it look all nice, remove any leaves or branches or anything from the graveyard. That way, it was all set up and pretty and cleaned up for the gathering that was supposed to happen the next day. Um, but it was basically just a day where we gather to. For some communities, it was just a day of remembrance, of remembering our dead, and placing flowers on the grave, bringing offerings like toys if it was a child that had passed. But then other times, other communities would even go so far as refuneralizing the dead. So they would have another funeral service for the dead every year. All of the dead all together, not like every individual grave, that would take forever. Um, and they would essentially just recommit them to the ground, in a sense of it was kind of like a folk ritual to help both the living and the dead come to terms with grief and mourning. Because every year we would return and we would recommit the body to the ground and the spirit to the Lord who sent it, and then we would decorate the graves with flowers, whether that's paper mache flowers that we made, or wildflowers that we picked or anything like that. And those were to be a symbol of basically the resurrection of the body. And that's how the graves back then were, traditionally laid out before cemeteries became public and we handed over the care of our dead to funeral homes. They were laid out as Christ was laid, meaning his head was to the west and his feet to the east. That way, when Gabriel, sounds the trumpet for the end of days, the day of judgment, and all the dead rise up, they can see Christ coming down from the eastern sky.
I didn't know this part. I didn't know
Oh
the
yeah,
part about. I didn't know all that stuff. I knew about
yeah. There's
decoration,
there's
but I
so
didn't
much
know
more
about
to
the
it.
other part. That's cool.
Yeah, it actually inspired Memorial Day for originally in the northern portions of Appalachia, like New York, Pennsylvania. But theirs was to simply acknowledge and celebrate the military, like soldiers who had died, especially just after the Civil War. But no, in southern Appalachia, the traditions go way deeper. Our graveyards were not grass lawns. They were traditionally, they basically mirrored our homes, because our homes didn't originally have grass lawns. They were swept yards, meaning they were simply swept and packed dirt yards. That way it was done for like a multitude of reasons. Because like if you had cattle or some other livestock on the land, having a swept dirt yard would basically make it to where cattle don't veer too close to the home in grazing. Uh, grass, trying to upkeep a lawn before the lawnmower was invented was extremely hard. And unless you could pay somebody to essentially hand cut the grass every so often, and
Could you
generally
imagine?
people weren't that wealthy, so they said get rid of the damn grass. We don't need it. But it also kept the tall grasses far away from the house to keep away snakes and
I
any
was thinking
poisonous
snakes
plants
right
for the
off.
children. Yeah, and then
Poison ivy and snakes are no thank you.
yeah, exactly. The grandmothers did not need all that damn hassle. Um, but that also made room in the yard for like family gatherings, for soap making, for washing laundry, for even cooking, or just making apple butter in the big apple butter. It was like the big cauldron looking things. Um, so yeah, it served a bunch of purposes, but we also kept the graveyard the same way as well. And the upkeep that we did for the graveyards was we would take, the livestock, whether it was goats or sheep, and we would take them into the graveyard to basically eat up all the grass. Because the graveyards were simply dirt areas, it afforded, again, a lot of room to gather. And, the children could run around and play without people worrying about them stepping on a snake or, stepping on a briar or getting into poisonous things that they shouldn't be. But then there was also the tradition of mounding the graves. So we would heap the dirt up along the entire length of the grave, about a foot off the ground. And it was into this mound that we would stick like the bouquets of flowers and stuff like that going down in a row, which was to mimic the rows of corn. Again, a symbol of resurrection, rising from the depths. And then that's also how, in the very beginning of this practice, as it was amalgamating from the Scots-Irish, the indigenous Cherokee, and the enslaved folks who were brought here, and it was all melding together. That's why graveyard dirt came to be used so much, because it was, so readily available. And then we would go so far as we would mound up the dirt, and then we would even gather like pebbles or sand and cover it over the mound itself to kind of bring kind of an individual sense to each individual grave. And it kind of made it to the point where, when the whole graveyard was like that, you could stand in a graveyard and you could get this feeling that you were not alone, as opposed to graveyards today where it's nothing but grass, lawns, and flat land. It just looks like a bunch of headstones in the ground. So
That's
even
wild.
after death, they were still afforded that personable presence, if that makes sense.
That's interesting. Thanks.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what your biggest motivator is in your practice?
Probably because of the day and age that we live in with the internet and the age of misinformation. It would probably be keeping it alive and as true to its history as it can be, especially in, current economy and everything like that that's currently poisoning our rivers and creeks and flattening our mountains. Because, with mountaintop removal, we've lost 500 mountains at this point. And then all the non-usable resource portions are just dumped into rivers and creeks and valleys and everything like that, which, endangers so many species in the creeks and, low-growing plants and everything like that. A big portion of this tradition isn't like others where it's how can I use this, or what can I use this for? How can I do it this way? It's more so about a relationship between us and the mountains, because everything is connected and everything deserves respect. And that's still something true. I mean, I know hunting is generally falling out as like a sport. Not many people are going hunting anymore. But all the hunters that I knew growing up, they would, like, if it was like an old buck who had like a monster rack, but he was extremely old in his years, they would let him go on by because he had earned his place, or like earned his right to have a natural death.
That's nice.
Especially with albino deer. Albino deer are, here anyway, said to be extremely bad luck to kill or harm or mess with in any way.
My family did not hunt, but I remember being in school and the guys would all get like the first 3 days off for hunting season.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all we did growing up, because, we was real poor, so all we basically ate and survived off of was either fishing for like bass and rainbow trout or, hunting.
Exactly.
So I grew up on a fridge full of nothing but venison, and I got so sick of it. It was so easy to get sick of it. And there's only so many ways you can cook a rainbow trout.
I am not a fish eater, so I cannot even fathom. What is something that you wish more people would ask you about?
Um, Probably to go off the last question, the whole, they always ask, how can I do this or what can I do for this? And there's never a question as to why. Like I said a second ago, Appalachian folk magic is very based on community because it was born out of community and it was born out of out of service to community, whether that was through the folk healer who was whispering a charm to stop the flow of blood during like an axe accident or a lumber accident, something like that.
An axe accident. Jesus
I don't know.
Christ.
I don't know.
Terrible.
You never know.
I know. I've wielded a couple. See how that happens.
Yeah. Or, something like that, that could be, life threatening or, put you out of work, something like that. Because, whether it was, the conjureman, the herb doctor or yarb doctor, as it was called, or the faith healer, which was also sometimes called a power doctor, because that was like a corruption of the term powwow, which is the term for faith healers in Northern Appalachia, in their traditions. It just kind of went from being powwow to power. Still kind of made sense though, because you're calling on the power to heal. But all of them, usually had a calling to it, and it often wasn't, of their own choice, much like our mountain preachers did and do have. Like you're gonna fight it at first, and then that's kind of like the first death throes of your ego, because you can't have that sense of what can I do for me, what can I do for me and my people. It can always be me. When you truly go to lay hands on someone in faith or going in prayer to recommend them to the spirit, whether it's for luck, love, money, whatever, you have to set yourself aside to let the power flow. And then, it's kind of like what is needed is water and you are just the pipe. You're not the water. Does that make sense?
Yes. What a good analogy.
You're just kind of like letting it flow, and it can't flow if you're in the way of it.
Huh, that's a really good. I like that a lot.
And that works the same way with like divination too, because I'll read playing cards for folks, and I also do bone throwing. And when you get in the way of that, you're getting in the way of the things they need and the answers they're searching and seeking for. So again, you have to just get the hell out of the way and just let it go and let it be its thing, and then just let it go from there.
That's so interesting. Well, I would like you to think of your favorite tool, whether it's a physical thing like a book or some kind, I don't know, a rock, a crystal, whatever, or if it's like more like a color or a philosophy. What is your favorite tool and how do you use it in your practice?
Oh, that's a hard one. I would probably just have to say, my family King James Bible, because there's so many things in it. Especially the Book of Psalms. The Book of Psalms itself is, what you would call a spell book. There's curses in it. There's blessings in it. There's words of power for money, luck, health for livestock, anything that you can think of as it pertains to human life can be found there, as well as other books of the Bible. Like even in the book of Deuteronomy, there's a blessing that like blesses your going out and your coming in, and you will be the head and not the tail, and you will be above and not below. Kind of just an overall prayer for success that a lot of people today still have hanging in their homes as like a charm itself over the whole house.
I was wondering if you were going to say Bible.
Well, not only that, but a way I was taught was, if you're doing, a lot of people know about, I think it's called bibliomancy, where you just, open up, you ask a question and you open up a book to, a random portion, and then whatever word your eyes land on is your answer. Well, with the Bible, it's the same way, except you can also get um, kind of what Nana would have called the blessed assurance, is where if you ask a question and you open the Bible, or specifically like a little copy of the New Testament, and your eyes find the words where Christ said, "It is done," or anything like that, where his words are written in red, then that is a steadfast answer of yes, it will come to pass.
I remember those little tiny Bibles. They gave me
Yeah,
one when I was in the Army.
yeah, with the New Testament and Psalms.
Uh-huh. Huh. I haven't thought about that in a minute.
Yep, you can put people's pictures in the Bible, put them upside down if you don't like them, tear them in half, and put them in different portions of the Bible to confuse them. You do a lot with the Bible.
Oh, I didn't think of that. That's a good one.
Yeah.
What's something you wish was discussed more in the magical community?
I think a lot of, because we all know that the magical community can be really toxic. And I think it all again stems down to the selfishness that is rampant throughout. Because everybody wants to, fan and feed their own ego. They want to be right. They want to be, the top dog, kind of. So there's more so that sense of service to self as opposed to service to others. You're focused on what everybody else is bringing to the table, and you haven't prepared your dish yet. Or you're, trying to hog your dish to yourself instead of, sharing in service to others.
How much am I here for the the potluck analogy?
Listen, I grew up Free Will Baptist.
I am a Taurus.
We love
Give
potlucks.
me all of that. That's where you get the best food at a church potluck.
Especially
Mostly.
after you wait 5 hours for the sermon to be done.
Oh no.
Everybody's starving at that point and they'll eat anything.
I like that.
Like, it gets to that point where, like, do y'all go home, or I know it was a good sermon, but I'm starving. Got me up at the ass crack of dawn.
I agree, though. I mean, I do feel like emphasis on outside yourself is important. So, random
We'd
question.
have a lot less witch wars if that was the case.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Okay. So, random question, sort of related to that. Hold on, I've forgotten it. I know I want to ask it. It'll come back up in a minute. Let me think of what it is. Okay, I remember. Random question. How do you feel about charging for it? Because I know some people think, oh, you shouldn't charge people for that. I have a differing opinion. What do you think about it?
So, not charging for it it depends on what the it is in Appalachian folk magic. Because when it comes to like fortune telling, like with playing cards or reading the bones or anything like that, it kind of depended on the person. Sometimes money would be expected. Other times money would also be expected, but it could not change hands. So people would often have their Bible right next to them, and the person would just flip the cash into the Bible. But with any kind of faith healing or folk healing like that, no money was to be accepted for any purpose at all, because both the faith healers, whenever they would travel around, were a lot like the circuit riding preachers who would travel around, and they mimicked their calling and their their work itself after the New Testament, when Christ sent out his disciples 2 by 2, and told them to take nothing with you. Do not, essentially don't pack food to try and care for yourself or anything like that, which was a callback to his Sermon on the Mount when he talked about how, the Lord, look, see the sparrows, how they, uh, you know, tarry not, the Lord, the Lord feeds them. How greater are you than, one of these, whether it's the lily of the field or, the sparrow, basically trying to teach them to rely on the creator as provider. So that's what the circuit riders and stuff would do, is they would take, necessities with them, like some kind of bedding or anything like that, and then, their Bible and stuff. But then all of their food and everything was simply gotten by the generosity of, the communities that they went into.
Well, there is a saying that says the Lord will provide.
Yeah. But then, the witch, of course, would, take some kind of money or something like that, as well as the conjureman, because he was, for hire generally. But it wasn't always necessarily money. Sometimes it was simply a barter and trade situation. So you could have taken them, tobacco, or offered them, a head of your livestock, or, anything like that. And that tradition spans back to even the Cherokee, whose medicine people would only accept like bits of cloth and beads for their time and their services.
I won't pretend that I wouldn't do some work for a good chicken pot pie.
Honestly, though. I mean, I've been paid in chickens. I've been paid with a turkey. I've been paid with tobacco. The chicken was, she was a client of mine, and I told her not to worry about the last card reading, but she insisted. And one of her chickens had gotten attacked by a hawk, but it survived. But because I guess it's like its neck got infected or something, the other chickens pecked it to death, and she didn't want the chicken to go to waste, basically. So yeah, she just brought it over to me in a trash bag.
Aw, chickens
Yeah.
are assholes, though.
They really can be. They're mean as shit.
Would you say that you have worked on building local in-person community near you? And if so, what have you done that maybe you can share to help others, inspire other people to do it, or help them figure out how to do it themselves?
I mean, I've kind of, done my best whenever, I could, especially because the main focus of, the community that I've been brought into is in regards to Appalachian folk traditions. So the main focus that I try to do is to not only be of service to people, but to also educate them at the same time. Because, there's a lot of misinformation surrounding not only Appalachian folk traditions, but Appalachia in general. Like, we've gotten into this whole like horror aesthetic surrounding Appalachia, which paints mountain folk as being some kind of like people who are scared of the dark, and scared to look out their windows, and all that type of stuff. So it's more so on the focus of learning about and getting a feel for the true culture itself, as opposed to what you just read online. Like, actually interact with people from this area, instead of just a random TikTok video.
Or Old Gods of Appalachia.
Yeah. Which, I mean, it's obviously fiction. I don't know why people are trying to,
It
paint
is
it
a
as
fun
being
story.
real. Yeah.
Because they're from California and don't know.
Yeah.
Or
Most of them
here.
ain't stepped foot off concrete.
That's a wild life.
Or, especially because, I do try to have a good presence in any kind of, like, online Appalachian community, especially when it pertains to magic. And there's there's always this season right around March and February when we get all of these like posts and people saying, "Hey, I just heard random screaming in the woods. I think there's like a monster or cryptid on my property." And it's like it's bobcat mating season. What you're hearing is like they're mating or they're
They're just
calling out
having a
for a
good
mate.
time. Or foxes scream.
Yeah, or even mountain lions. I know a lot of people say we don't have mountain lions, but I I believe we do.
Have you heard a barn owl when they're mad?
Probably.
That is terrifying.
Yeah.
If you hear that out in the woods, good Lord. I'm not going out there if I hear that.
I know
Anyway.
we had a giant great horned owl here on the property a couple of years ago, and I just heard like faint hooting outside. And so I stepped outside, and in this tree in the yard, it's about what, maybe 20 yards away. It was in the winter time, so like all the branches and stuff were bare. But it was also like that kind of winter season where like the sky's kind of lit up, so you can basically see everything still.
Mhm.
And the biggest owl I have ever seen just like flew off. Like its wingspan had to be about 5 feet.
I
It
do love an
was
owl.
the absolute biggest bird I have ever seen in my life.
They're so neat.
Yeah. It was very ominous.
Okay, now I want you to think about the 3 biggest influences on your practice, whether it's people or animals or deity or a book you read once, whatever. Thank them for the effects they have on your practice or on you.
Um, I mean, the first would have to be, my Nana. Um, because I didn't just learn like about the physical things of this work, like the Bible and the candle and everything like that. She also taught me how to carry, empathy, strength, resilience, and pain all in the same bag without growing weary. She knew how to hold her own, and that's how she lived her life. Um, the second would probably be, obviously my mother, um, for teaching me how self worth and humility can be in a beneficial balance without the ugly head of selfishness or self pity rearing up. Um, so yeah, but both of them combined kind of made me who I am, not only in my practice but also as a person. Um, and then the third biggest influence. Now I'm blanking.
Any plants that you like to work with? Would it be the Bible?
I'd probably have to say my great grandmother, because she was, one of the sweetest women, who ever lived, in my mind. Because some of my greatest, childhood memories are, up on the mountain and, just playing in the creek and stuff at her house. She just kind of had this. I don't remember her going to church a lot, but I know she had a kind of silent, resilient faith. Um, I don't know. It was just something about her and the way she lived her life that it was kind of like both the solution and the cure for like all the oppression that Appalachian people have faced.
I like
So I
that.
guess just strong roots in general.
That's important.
Yep.
Do you have any advice for new practitioners?
Um, I would probably start with getting to know the land and its history. Like you said, the plants and the animals that call it home, their behaviors, how they behave in their environment, and how that environment also uh, not only influences them, but is influenced by them, um, as well as the people who lived there before you and their history. Um, that will kind of introduce you into the circle of life that is all around you in your, your own local community, and how you can be uh, an integrated part of it. Um, and then once you start to get to know the story of the land, I would say look into your own story and your ancestor stories, and spend time with your dearly departed, whether it's at your ancestor shrine or even at their grave. Uh, and in remembering them, you'll eventually learn to see them within yourself, and how you are like a patchwork quilt made up of their different quirks and behaviors and likes and dislikes, and the way you handle the way you handle certain situations, and stuff like that. Does that make
I like
sense?
that way of looking at it. A
Yeah.
patchwork quilt. I like that. So now that you've seen what it's like to talk to me and you've seen what the questions are like, who do you think would be interesting for me to have on the show?
Lord, I don't know. I'd probably say Patrick Don Moyer. He's done a lot of work with the folk traditions and folk ways in northern Appalachia, and I haven't seen a lot of podcasts with him on it.
Awesome. Thank you. I will look him up. That question is absolutely me fishing for guest suggestions.
Ain't no shame in that.
Well, is there anything else you wanted to talk about? Anything I didn't ask? Any questions you had for me? Anything going on with you that you want to share?
Not much. I'm currently working on book number 4, which will be soon added to the Backwoods Library, as I like to call all of my works. So, I mean, everybody can follow me on my socials, whether that's Facebook, Instagram, whatever, to keep up to date with it. Every now and then I'll post a little snippet, or, a paragraph here and there of the book, to, kind of give you guys a feel for what it's going to be about, without giving out all the details and telling you where my horse is tied up.
I haven't heard that one before. Is it Appalachian Mountain Witchcraft? Is that the group on Facebook?
The Appalachian Mountain Witch?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm one of the admins of it.
So we can find you there too?
Yeah, I mean, technically. I do also run a blog on Appalachian folk magic that I've been running for a few years now, called Holy Stones and Iron Bones.
That's a good one. I like that. The last 2 things that I ask of guests. Well, there are 2 things that I ask of guests, 2 things left.
Mm-hmm.
And thing number 1 is recommend something. Doesn't have to be magical related at all. Just whatever thing you're into this week, share it and recommend it.
Girl, I got ADHD. I don't know. Recommend something.
Here, I'll do it. Cadbury mini eggs. It's Cadbury mini egg season, everyone. Go get you that.
True. That is true.
They're in every gas station now. Bag? Did I order a 5-pound bag of them? Yes, I did. So the second thing is, please tell me a story. It can be a story you heard growing up, or it could be something wild that happened to you that you like telling.
Okay, well, one I like to tell, nobody ever believes me, but I swear it was true, was growing up on the mountain at Mama's house. My great-grandmother, she lived in Mitchell County, and from her front porch you could see the very tip top of Mitchell Mountain, which is the highest point east of the Mississippi. But down in the front yard, in the holler, there was a big weeping willow tree that had an iron swing set underneath it that she would go and sit on. But then in front of next to the willow tree was this big pond, and there was a little tiny black bridge going in the middle of the pond. So the pond was kind of shaped like an infinity symbol, and then in the middle is where the bridge crossed. But when I was little, like I was maybe 5 years old, they would always tell me not to get too close to the water because there was a giant fish in there and he'd eat me. And even at 5 years old, I didn't believe adults. I was like, "You're lying. There's no giant fish in there." Uh, but one of the last times that I was by that pond, I finally saw that fish, and it was like a giant catfish, but it was albino, and it had to be at least 6 feet, like in length. And then there was another kind of normal brownish catfish in with it. And it always reminds me of kind of like the yin yang symbol, the way they would swim sometimes. But yeah, that fish was ginormous. He could have easily eaten 5-year-old Jake.
I
And the only
remember
thing that you would have
stories
heard was the ducks quacking.
I remember stories of monster catfish at Smith Mountain Lake
I do. They're like
down by the
wild
dam.
goldfish. They can get big.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being on the show.
And thank you for having me.
Everybody be sure to check the show notes, click and follow, and I'll see you on the internet. Okay, bye. So, Jake, would you craft a spell with me? I don't know how it's going to work because I don't work with the Bible at all, and I don't know how you do your working.
Okay.
So, it's an experiment. And actually, I meant to write out a list of things that we could choose from as far as intention, but I forgot to. So I'm just going to name some crap off, and we're going to jump on one.
Okay.
Like protection, peaceful home, bringing in money, not losing your shit in this political climate.
Oh, God. That's the truth. Oh, let's see here. Trying to think, and of course my mind's going damn blank. I don't know. Let's do protection. That seems like the easiest and most often thought out.
Yeah, I think that's where everybody starts out anyway. If they're starting out like their practice.
Yeah.
So, or like a love spell, but I don't do that. Anyway, to hear more of the members only episode, head over to crepuscularconjuration.com. The monthly magic tier will give you access to the monthly Magic Marco Polo group, the private Facebook group, and access to the written monthly spells. There's also Crepuscular Conjurations, giving you bonus podcast episodes, coloring pages, guided meditations, spellcrafting videos, printable downloads, and a lot more. The free Witchy Wonderment level will give you a little sample of everything I just mentioned. You can also visit my shop, Clever Kim's Curios, to get spell boxes one at a time or by monthly subscription, intentional handcrafted jewelry that I make especially for witches, and handmade altar tools. You can even listen to the full Your Average Witch podcast library, including show notes and transcripts. Check it out at crepuscularconjuration.com. Thanks for listening to this episode of Your Average Witch. You can find us all around the internet on Instagram at Your Average Witch Podcast, Facebook.com/groups/Hivehouse, at www.youraveragewitch.com, and at your favorite podcast service. If you'd like to recommend someone for the podcast, like to be on it yourself, or if you'd like to advertise on the podcast, send an email to youraveragewitchpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next Tuesday.